All right, you guys know I love a good mystery, right? Well, buckle up, because this deep dive into the Franklin scandal is about as juicy as it gets. We're talking potential corruption, cover-ups, and allegations you wouldn't believe even if they were in a movie.
And what's crazy is that this isn't some fictional story.
Yeah.
What we're looking at here, it goes way beyond a local scandal. It gets to the heart of power, how it's used or abused, and how those in charge can take advantage of the trust people put in them.
And let's be clear, the material you sent over is intense.
Right.
So let's just jump right into it. This whole thing, it all seems to revolve around this guy, Larry King Jr. And just to be clear, we're not talking about the talk shows.
Right.
Wow.
Different Larry King.
This King, he was a big deal in Nebraska Republican politics back in the 80s. Charismatic, well-connected, throwing these lavish parties. But then everything falls apart, and it all links back to this credit union he was running.
The Franklin Community Federal Credit Union.
Exactly. So tell me more about that. What was going on there?
Well, King takes over this credit union, and on the surface, it seems like he's doing good work, especially in the Black community.
Right.
But behind the scenes, it's a completely different story. We're talking about massive financial mismanagement, possible Ponzi schemes, even whispers of something way darker.
Okay. Yeah, this is where things start to get really unsettling, because it's more than just King spending money on fancy dinners or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was buying people plane tickets, expensive gifts, even allegedly had a secret bedroom built in the credit union's basement. Okay, come on. Who needs a secret bedroom in a credit union?
That's the thing, right? Those details, they might seem small, but they often point to a much bigger picture. A pattern of someone trying to control and manipulate others. Was he using the credit union's money to buy influence, keep people quiet, or something even worse? Those are the questions we have to ask.
Right. And you would think, I mean, with all this suspicious activity going on, there had to be some red flags, right? Someone must have noticed.
Yeah, and that's the crazy part. According to the documents you provided, there were actually warning signs about Franklin's finances for years. Yeah, years. So that begs another big question. Why weren't authorities stepping in sooner? Was King really that untouchable, or did the system just fail to do its job?
Man, and just when you think it can't get any weirder, we haven't even touched on the Webbs yet.
Oh, boy, yeah.
This couple, they were running a foster home, seemed like model citizens. I mean, they were even winning awards for their service. But then you dig a little deeper, and
It's dark.
it's like something straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah.
What was really going on in that house?
Well, based on firsthand accounts from the children who were placed in their care, the Webbs were anything but loving parents. We're talking physical abuse, starvation, isolation, just horrific stuff.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show how abusers can hide behind a mask of respectability.
God, yeah. And this is where reading through the research, this is where my heart really sank. One of the Webb children, Eulise Washington, she bravely came forward, alleging she was sexually abused by Jarrett Webb. And to make matters worse, she even passed a polygraph test.
Which you would think would be pretty convincing evidence.
Right.
But sadly, we see this time and time again in cases of sexual abuse. The victim's word is often questioned, minimized, or just outright dismissed. And the lack of action in Ulysses' case is sadly very common. It shows just how hard it is for survivors to get justice.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking. So we've got King, this guy living large, spending money left and right, seemingly untouchable. Then we have the Webbs, this picture-perfect couple hiding this horrible secret. I mean, it just feels like there has to be some kind of connection there, don't you think? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where this deep dive takes an even darker turn, because the Webbs, specifically Barbara Webb, were related to Larry King Jr. And not only were they related, they ran in the same social circles. We even have accounts of the children from the Webb home being taken to King's parties, those same lavish gatherings that raised so many eyebrows.
Hold on. So you're telling me these parties, with all these important people there, were potentially the backdrop for something much, much worse? How could something like this go unnoticed? Or worse, ignored?
Well, that's exactly what we need to uncover. Were there deliberate attempts to silence people? Were authorities pressured to look the other way? And if so, just how high up did this alleged cover-up go?
Man, this is heavy stuff.
It is. It really is.
It's like, when you think about powerful people and cover-ups, you imagine those scenes from old movies, right? Like smoky rooms, threats in hushed tones, maybe a mysterious figure disappearing down a dark alley.
Right, like classic film noir.
Exactly. But with this Franklin scandal, it seems the way they went about silencing people was anything but subtle.
No, you're right. And you highlighted it well in the research you sent over. There are multiple instances where victims, witnesses, even journalists looking into this, they felt threatened or they'd hit these roadblocks. Like, for example, you've got several people who were going to testify to the grand jury and then she
Yeah.
mentioned. They completely changed their stories, claimed they'd been forced or scared into saying stuff.
It's like, how can they get away with that? And then there's that whole thing with Gary Caradori, right? The private investigator hired by the Nebraska legislature. He was looking into the credit union collapse and all the allegations, and he was finding some pretty damning stuff.
Oh, he definitely was. Caradori's investigation was really digging deep. Financial records, travel logs, you name it. He even interviewed people who said they saw or experienced this firsthand.
But then, of course, he dies in that plane crash before he could tell anyone. And it wasn't just any plane crash either, right? It was super suspicious.
Yeah, his plane just falls apart in midair. And get this, some of his files were missing from the wreckage, including, reportedly, audio recordings of witness
Oh,
testimony.
come on. Seriously. That's insane. It's like they were trying to make it obvious.
It really does make you wonder. And then on top of all that, we have this Charlie Rogers character. Supposedly, he worked for Larry King Jr.
And he also ends up dead under mysterious circumstances, right?
Exactly. And get this, not long before his death, Rogers allegedly tells his sister that if anything were to happen to him, she should contact this specific lawyer.
And when she finally reaches out to the lawyer,
The lawyer claims he barely knows Rogers, which, raises some major red flags. Was Rogers about to blow the whistle on King, on this potential network of abusers? And did that cost him his life?
it's definitely suspicious. And speaking of suspicious, we can't forget about the whole CIA connection. Didn't your research mention allegations that some of the children who were possibly trafficked to those parties had ties to Boys Town?
Yeah, that's right.
Boys Town, like the home for troubled boys.
The very same. And some sources suggest a possible link between the Franklin scandal and a CIA operation. Although, to be honest, the details are really murky.
Yeah, it's like trying to put together a puzzle, but half the pieces are missing.
Exactly. And without all the pieces, it's almost impossible to know for sure what really went down.
Yeah.
But I mean, come on, you've got the suspicious deaths, the missing files, the conflicting stories. It's hard to deny that something was off. It really seems like there was a serious effort to bury the truth.
So let me get this straight. We've got accusations of financial crimes, potential child trafficking, this network of powerful people involved, and on top of all that, a massive cover-up. It's a lot to wrap your head around. Where do we even begin to untangle all of this? I'll be honest, it's easy to get kind of lost in all of this. I mean, we're talking about some seriously heavy stuff here. These disturbing allegations, the hints of high-level corruption, the suspicious deaths, disappearances. It's like something straight out of a political thriller. But this is real life, and that's what's so unsettling.
You hit the nail on the head. The Franklin scandal, it just goes to show how easily power can be abused, especially when those in positions of authority think they're above the law. And that's a scary thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
So where do we even go from here? I mean, we've uncovered all these horrifying allegations, but there are still so many unanswered questions. It's like we're just scratching the surface.
That's the thing about these deep dives, They often unearth more questions than answers. But even without having all the pieces, there are still important lessons we can learn. The Franklin scandal, whether you believe every single allegation or not, it forces us to confront some ugly truths about the nature of power, about the importance of accountability, about how easily things can slip through the cracks.
It makes you think about how difficult it must be for survivors to come forward, especially when they're up against powerful people who can easily silence them. It takes incredible courage.
You're absolutely right. Ulysses Washington and others who have shared their stories, they are incredibly brave. They were willing to speak truth to power, even when faced with doubt and hostility. It's a testament to their resilience, for sure.
Absolutely. So what can we take away from all of this? For me, for anyone listening who's hearing about this for the first time, it feels like this is so much bigger than just one scandal.
You're right, it is bigger. The Franklin scandal, when you boil it all down, it's about the abuse of power and the systems that enable it. It's a reminder that we have to believe survivors, that we have to demand transparency, that we can never be afraid to ask the hard questions.
It's a lot to process, that's for sure. This whole deep dive, it's been disturbing, but it's also made me more determined to seek out the truth, to make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
And that's what matters. Don't let this be the end of your exploration. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep the memory of the Franklin scandal alive. Because it's by confronting these tough realities that we can hope to prevent them from happening again.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been a deep dive into some dark territory, no doubt. But sometimes it's in those dark corners where we find the most important truths. And if this conversation has left you with more questions than answers, well, that means we've done our job. So keep digging, keep questioning, and never ever be afraid to demand the truth.